There comes a moment in every person's life when the pursuit of money stops being a material desire and transforms into something far more revealing, a mirror that reflects who you truly are. People often think spirituality and wealth stand on opposite ends of the spectrum, but in reality, the way you relate to money exposes your deepest wounds, your hidden fears, and the unhealed corners of your identity. Money is not just currency, it is a symbol. It amplifies whatever already exists in you. If you feel small, it mirrors that smallness. If you feel unworthy, it reinforces that belief. If you carry shame from your past, it makes that shame louder. And if you are secretly afraid of your own power, money becomes the easiest place to sabotage yourself. You don't struggle with money because the world is unfair. You struggle because your inner world has fractures that you haven't acknowledged yet. The fear of charging your worth, the hesitation to take opportunities, the instinct to stay safe in scarcity. These are not financial problems. They are psychological shadows you've never learned to face. Making money becomes a spiritual test because it forces you to confront these shadows. It demands that you own your value. It pulls you into responsibility. It challenges your identity and asks, who do you become when abundance knocks at your door? Do you accept it with confidence, or do you shrink because you don't believe good things are meant for you? Money reveals your relationship with self-trust. Every financial decision, whether you invest, create, grow, or retreat, reflects the level of trust you have in your own mind, your own abilities, and your own future. Abundance isn't for the lucky. It is for those willing to meet their fears without running from them. And perhaps the spiritual test is this. Can you remain grounded, compassionate, and aligned while you succeed? Can you grow without losing yourself? Can you rise without letting the wounds of your past dictate the limits of your future? Money will challenge your ego, your patience, your discipline, and your integrity. It will test whether you choose expansion or cling to excuses. It will force you to evolve emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Because the truth is, your bank account is nothing more than a reflection of your internal beliefs. When you finally understand this, wealth stops being a chase. It becomes a natural consequence of healing, clarity, purpose, and self-belief. And that is why making money might not be your biggest ambition. It might be your greatest spiritual awakening. Money is a mirror, not a destination, because it reflects back to you everything you believe about yourself, your worth, your limitations, your fears, and your deepest assumptions about what you deserve in this world. When people chase money as if it is the final prize, they overlook the truth. Money doesn't change who you are. It amplifies what is already inside you. If you carry a sense of lack, money will highlight it. If you carry inner confidence, money will emphasize that too. This is why some people sabotage opportunities, delay taking action, or feel uncomfortable earning more. They're not responding to money itself, but to what money reveals about their internal world. When you view money only as a goal, you become trapped in an endless cycle of striving. But when you see it as a mirror, you begin to understand that your financial reality is simply a reflection of your emotional, psychological, and spiritual reality. For example, if you struggle to receive, it may not be because opportunities don't exist, but because part of you feels unworthy of them. If you feel guilt when you ask for what you deserve, the issue is not the number, it's the wounds you carry from a past that taught you to minimize yourself. The pursuit of money exposes these invisible patterns with extraordinary clarity. Your bank account often reflects your inner dialogue more than your outer circumstances. The stories you tell yourself, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I can't take that risk, people like me don't become wealthy, shape the actions you take and the opportunities you allow yourself to receive. Money becomes a mirror because it makes these hidden stories visible. The more you grow internally, the more your external finances tend to shift to match that growth. When you develop self-trust, money responds. When you break cycles of fear, your capacity to create and sustain wealth expands. Seeing money as a mirror also frees you from shame. Instead of judging yourself for not having enough, you begin asking deeper questions. What belief is being reflected here? What fear is rising to the surface? What part of me is still protecting itself through scarcity? This approach turns money into a teacher rather than a tyrant. It guides you toward healing rather than self-punishment. Ultimately, when you stop treating money as the destination and start understanding it as a reflection, you reclaim your power. You realize that wealth doesn't come from chasing something outside you. It comes from transforming what's within you. Financial struggles often come from psychological wounds because the way you earn, spend, save, or avoid money is deeply influenced by the emotional experiences that shaped you long before you understood what money even meant. Many people believe they have a money problem, when in reality they have an inner conflict disguised as a financial one. The hesitation to pursue opportunities, the tendency to undercharge, the fear of taking risks, or the impulse to overspend are rarely about numbers. They are rooted in old emotional patterns that still operate beneath awareness. When a person grows up in an environment where scarcity was normal, where asking for more was discouraged, or where worth was tied to struggle, these experiences create psychological imprints that later express themselves in financial behavior. Unresolved wounds can create an internal resistance to abundance. For some, it comes from childhood messages like money is hard to come by or good people don't care about money. For others, it stems from shame, rejection, or trauma that taught them to stay small, avoid attention, or feel undeserving of success. Because money often symbolizes safety, power, and freedom, any part of you that fears these things will quietly sabotage your financial growth. A person may avoid opportunities without knowing why, procrastinate on important tasks, or stay in environments that limit them simply because the idea of expansion feels threatening to an old identity that hasn't been healed. These wounds also influence your financial decisions. If you fear abandonment, you might overspend to feel temporarily valued. If you fear failure, you might stay in a job you've outgrown. If you fear being judged, you might avoid raising your prices. Each behavior appears practical on the surface, but underneath it is a wound trying to protect you from emotional pain. Money becomes the battlefield where these subconscious conflicts play out, and the struggle with finances becomes a symptom rather than the root cause. The moment you start addressing your psychological wounds, your financial patterns begin to shift. Healing helps you develop self-worth, and self-worth influences what you believe you deserve. Healing builds self-trust, and self-trust influences the risks you are willing to take. Healing strengthens your boundaries, and boundaries influence how you negotiate, choose relationships, and protect your resources. When the inner world changes, the outer world adjusts to match it. Financial freedom then becomes less about strategies and more about emotional liberation. Making money requires confronting your shadow self because the process of creating, receiving, and holding wealth forces you to face the hidden parts of you that you usually avoid. The shadow is made of everything you deny, suppress, or reject about yourself, your fears, insecurities, unhealed memories, and limiting beliefs. When you attempt to make more money, these buried aspects rise to the surface because abundance challenges the old identity that has kept you safe but small. You cannot expand financially without expanding psychologically, and that expansion requires acknowledging the inner blocks that silently shape your decisions. Every time you reach for a new level of income, you trigger internal resistance. Part of you wants growth, but another part fears exposure, failure, judgment, or change. This conflict is not a lack of discipline. It is your shadow pulling you back to what feels familiar. For example, if your shadow carries the belief that you are unworthy, you might hesitate to charge what your work is worth. If your shadow fears rejection, you might avoid promoting yourself or asking for opportunities. If your shadow associates success with loss or betrayal, you may unconsciously sabotage your progress to avoid emotional pain. These patterns have nothing to do with capability and everything to do with unexamined wounds. The journey of making money becomes a journey into your own inner landscape. You start to notice the fears that whisper whenever you try something new, the guilt that arises when life becomes easier, the shame that surfaces when you imagine having more than others, and the doubt that questions whether you deserve abundance at all. These emotions are invitations to heal, not signs to retreat. They reveal the old stories you inherited, stories about struggle, identity, power, and worthiness. Money becomes a catalyst for transformation because it exposes the internal narratives that have ruled you from the shadows. As you confront these hidden parts, you develop a new relationship with yourself, one rooted in honesty, courage, and self-respect. You learn to tolerate visibility, to accept responsibility, and to trust your ability to create. The more you integrate your shadow, the less power it has over your actions. You begin making decisions from clarity instead of fear, from expansion instead of protection. The pursuit of wealth becomes a spiritual and psychological initiation, pushing you to align with a more empowered version of yourself. In facing your shadow, you unlock not just the capacity to earn more, but the capacity to become more. Abundance follows self-trust, because the ability to create and sustain wealth depends on how deeply you believe in your own judgment, capability, and inner wisdom. When you trust yourself, you move through the world with a quiet certainty that you can handle whatever comes your way. That confidence becomes the foundation for making clear decisions, taking meaningful risks, and pursuing opportunities that others might shy away from. Self-trust is not loud or flashy. It is the calm conviction that you are capable of building a life that reflects your highest potential. And abundance naturally gravitates toward people who operate from that kind of grounded inner alignment. When self-trust is weak, abundance feels unstable or unreachable. Doubt makes you hesitate, second-guess your ideas, or rely too heavily on outside validation. Even when opportunities appear, your lack of trust can cause you to shrink away from them. You may talk yourself out of applying for a position, raising your prices, starting a project, or stepping into a more expansive version of yourself. The obstacle is rarely the opportunity itself. It is the internal voice that whispers, "What if you fail?" Or "What if you're not enough?" This voice doesn't just slow you down, it convinces you to live beneath your potential, making abundance feel distant even when it is within reach. But when you build self-trust, everything changes. You start making decisions faster because you no longer need endless reassurance. You become resilient because setbacks no longer define your worth. You take smarter risks because you trust your ability to recover, adapt, and grow. You stop waiting for permission and begin creating your own pathways. This internal shift naturally expands your life externally. The jobs you pursue, the relationships you form, the ideas you execute, and the boundaries you set all begin to reflect someone who believes they are worthy of more. Abundance doesn't require perfection, it requires the willingness to back yourself consistently. It flows toward people who choose action over fear, commitment over hesitation, and authenticity over performance. Every time you honor your intuition, follow your calling, or stand firm in your worth, you reinforce the inner foundation that abundance builds upon. In this way, wealth becomes less about luck and more about alignment. The more you trust yourself, the more you unlock the levels of life that were never inaccessible, only waiting for you to believe you could reach them. Wealth challenges your integrity and identity because it forces you to confront who you truly are beneath your ideals, fears, and the roles you've grown comfortable playing. When you begin to rise financially, you are pushed into situations that require clearer boundaries, stronger values, and a deeper understanding of yourself. Wealth magnifies every internal contradiction, your desire to be generous versus your fear of being taken advantage of, your longing for freedom versus your attachment to old habits, your wish to succeed versus your fear of outgrowing people or versions of yourself. These tensions aren't created by money, they are revealed by it. Wealth simply brings everything hidden to the surface. With more success comes more responsibility. You are no longer able to hide behind excuses or blame external circumstances for your choices. You must decide who you want to be when opportunities grow, when options expand, and when your decisions carry more weight. This is where integrity is tested, not in moments of scarcity, but in moments of abundance. When you have more power, more influence, and more freedom, the temptation to break your own values or compromise your principles becomes stronger. Wealth asks you, will you stay aligned with your truth even when you don't have to? That question can only be answered through action, not intention. Identity is also challenged because abundance pulls you out of your old self-concept. If you've spent years seeing yourself as the struggler, the survivor, the overlooked one, or the person who always sacrifices, wealth threatens those narratives. It asks you to let go of identities built around hardship and embrace a version of yourself that feels powerful, capable, and deserving. This shift is uncomfortable because it requires releasing familiar emotional patterns, shedding limiting beliefs, and stepping into a new psychological reality. Many people unconsciously sabotage themselves at this stage, not because they fear wealth itself, but because they fear becoming someone they don't yet know how to be. As you grow financially, relationships may shift as well. Some people will celebrate your evolution, while others may project their insecurities onto your success. This forces you to choose between shrinking to maintain comfort or expanding to honor your growth. Wealth, therefore, becomes a mirror that asks, do you value connection or convenience, your potential or your past, your truth or others' expectations? Navigating these questions requires strength, clarity, and a willingness to evolve. In this way, wealth becomes not just a financial achievement, but a profound test of character, revealing who you are and who you are willing to become. True prosperity emerges from healing, purpose, and alignment, because wealth that is not rooted in inner wholeness is always fragile, easily shaken by external circumstances, and unable to bring real fulfillment. When a person carries unhealed wounds, unresolved fears, or a fractured sense of self, their relationship with abundance becomes unstable. They either chase success to fill an internal void or push it away because deep down they do not believe they deserve it. Healing becomes the foundation because it restores the emotional clarity and self-worth needed to welcome prosperity without fear or self-sabotage. The more you repair your inner world, the more naturally you attract opportunities that match your renewed sense of value. Purpose adds direction to prosperity. Without purpose, success becomes empty, repetitive, and exhausting. People may accumulate money yet feel spiritually depleted because their actions are disconnected from what genuinely matters to them. Purpose transforms wealth into a tool rather than an obsession. It gives meaning to the work you do and clarity to the choices you make. When you move with purpose, you are guided by something deeper than fear or ego. You are guided by intention. Opportunities that once felt forced begin to flow more easily because your path is aligned with your authentic strengths and desires. Prosperity becomes a natural byproduct of living in a way that honors your inner truth. Alignment ties everything together. Alignment means your actions match your values, your goals match your identity, and your decisions match the person you are becoming. When you are aligned, you stop acting out of guilt, anxiety, or social expectation. You make choices that support your long-term growth rather than short-term comfort. Alignment brings peace, and peace creates the mental space needed to recognize and pursue abundant possibilities. It protects you from distractions, keeps you focused on what genuinely matters, and opens doors to opportunities that resonate with your highest self. When healing clears your emotional blocks, purpose clarifies your direction, and alignment ensures your actions reflect your truth, prosperity flows naturally. It no longer requires force or constant struggle. Instead of chasing wealth as a way to prove something, you allow it to arrive because you've become someone who can hold it with maturity, gratitude, and clarity. True prosperity is not just about what you have, it is about who you become in the process. And so, as you stand at the edge of your next chapter, remember this: money is not the prize, you are. The journey toward wealth is the journey back to yourself, to the parts of you that once doubted, once feared, once hid from your own potential. Every step you take toward abundance is really a step toward healing, clarity, responsibility, and truth. The real success is not measured in numbers, but in the person you become while creating them. If you choose to rise, rise with integrity. If you choose to grow, grow with purpose. And if you choose to receive, receive with the confidence of someone who finally understands their worth. Because the moment you step into alignment with who you truly are, abundance is no longer something you chase. It becomes something that naturally finds you,